could say one thing to the Trump administration about the tariffs, what would you say?
Foreign governments don't pay the tariff.
Yeah.
and the other thing I would say from a standpoint of what the intention of them were, right? Because I'm the CEO of a business that directly benefited from these tariffs. They did exactly what they were intended to do, right? Drive more manufacturing in the U.S. But that's in a category that the U.S. is well positioned to support.
Right.
For other business, I do not know of a single manufacturer in the U.S. that can come even close to the price points that our customers require. So my word to them would be, tariffs work in the right, HTS codes, in the right business segments, in the right product lines.
Welcome to Manufacturing Insiders. Today I have Preston Gardner with me. He is the Chief Operating Officer at Palmer Hamilton, which is it's an all-American furniture maker. They are really a case study in vertical integration. They have just an unbelievable amount of processes going on in this facility, and they've built just a really successful business that, a lot of American businesses in a similar space have really had to lean on overseas manufacturing and have even been replaced by overseas manufacturing. So the fact that they're still going strong, it means that they're doing something right. Preston is a second generation member of the company, and he is really taking a leadership role and making a lot of active changes. Today we are going to talk about a lot of things, but I think the thing I want to start off with is the tariff conversation. Preston has seen a lot of direct impacts on his business. We have a lot of mixed opinions. I think a lot of people kind of are, 50-50. Okay, I see the positives, but I also see the negatives. So we'll chat some about that and see what, the real, on the ground impact of that has been. So welcome to Manufacturing Insiders, Preston.
Thanks, Nate. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Before I get too far into it, just like to make a quick note. If you are a manufacturing leader and you have insights that you feel would benefit other leaders, go to manufacturinginsiders.com, fill out our form there. We'd love to have you on. Also, please subscribe to our channel. Give us a like. You'll see us all over the place on Instagram, TikTok, everywhere you can imagine. So follow us, find us, like us. Thanks. So Preston, how did you get involved in the business here, and how long you been there?
Yeah, I've been in my active role since 2019. I grew up in the business, as you noted, second generation. My father has been involved in Palmer Hamilton since 1995. I grew up around this business, whether it's from turning wrenches out on the floor, loading trucks out on the floor in between school seasons, summer internships, and whatnot. I've been doing that since 2007.
Yeah.
But back in my full-time capacity after some time away after college since 2019.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I noticed, when I originally talked to you, you do have an air of professionalism and you have a lot of knowledge and insights. Which I think a lot of times when you move into second and third generations in a business, sometimes it's just assumed that they're going to take on a role. In a lot of cases, it almost feels like it hasn't been earned. You went and worked, for another company for quite a few years. Tell me kind of what you learned there and what benefit do you see in that sort of a setup versus just moving directly into the business?
Yeah, I think, for me, personal development was huge. It was never the plan presented to me to be back here in my second professional career. So I really set out to achieve something for myself without knowing I was going to get an opportunity to come into the fold here as a second generation. So I think looking back, it was very critical. I was able to bring a level of skill set that this business didn't have back into the company. I went out and I got a career in a publicly traded furniture company, H&I. Spent better part of 8 years there. Great level of professional development. Some great mentors in that company.
Yep.
Big company, publicly traded. With that comes a lot of development programs, whether it's from an engineering and manufacturing development program standpoint or a leadership development program as well. So really got to spread my wings and learn a lot there, from the back end manufacturing to the front end business management. Something that I looking back on it has been so critical in establishing my skill set to bring here to Palmer Hamilton.
Sure. So, what do you think was the biggest takeaway? I mean, when you came into Palmer Hamilton, what was the piece that you saw missing right off the bat, and you're like, we need to get this implemented?
Yeah, so we're a small manufacturing business here. We've got about 225 employees. So obviously, you come in having that big company experience, and you're trying to figure out right away how can I take that big company framework and headcount and apply it in that skills and apply it to a small manufacturing operation. So what I found right away was efficiency. You with those big companies, they really focus on efficiency from the front end product development to the customer service side when you're delivering that product to them. So for me, it was how do we make the headcount in this building go farther? So efficiencies from, whether it's you talked about vertical integration or just efficiencies from engineering and design as well. So there's a lot of things that you don't have that rigor and protocol in a small business that greatly benefits you, excuse me,
No problem.
that greatly benefits you being able to produce in a very efficient manner. And I think that's something that right away we picked up on. There's a lot of things that we could do to drive efficiency into our business.
Yeah, for sure. So, you mentioned previously some of the, 5S efforts, and, and I would assume that in a larger company, there's a lot of focus on lean and those sorts of ideas. Um, Did you did you come in and aggressively implement those, or did you kind of think there are some benefits to the mom and pop, and maybe sometimes larger companies get a little too obsessed with those sorts of things? Like, where'd you land on that?
Yeah, my personal style is I didn't need to come in and make a big splash, right? A lot of these people I had grown up working alongside, right? So it was just about coming in, establishing my credibility in my new role, getting some quick wins, getting that buy-in that like, hey, the things that he's working on and thinking about add value to this business. 5S is a journey, right? Yes, larger companies, they have whole teams, departments, week long sessions where you're just talking about 5S and lean manufacturing. We had to start on the ground level here, right? Because you're not successful with those initiatives without really getting the buy-in at the individual level, right? Because they're
Right,
the ones that got to maintain it day in and day out.
right.
So some of the things I did was, look at it from a multi-prong approach, right? The fear of like, hey, this business has always been this way. I don't really know any different, right? We have people of tenure here of 20 to 30 years. The company's changed names since they've been here.
Yeah,
So what I started out on, I've got a lot of strong industry partners, field trips, right? Like I had seen the types of places and operations that exist in manufacturing.
yeah.
And a lot of these people have never experienced that. So we worked with some industry partners in tangential industries to say, like, hey, come take a look at what these other companies are doing, looking at the working environment they have, look at how they handle certain processes, work centers, cellular manufacturing, concepts that are totally new to these people.
Yeah,
We started with that just to say, like, hey, don't
that's
take
a
my
great
word
idea.
for it. Like,
Yeah,
let's come check out some of these other places.
that's a great idea. Yeah, I don't hear of companies doing that sort of thing too much. If other companies wanted to do something like that, I mean, let's say you have a machine shop, um, a lot of their fellow machine shop owners would probably be a little resistant to the idea.
Yep.
So how would you do that?
We already had some OEM business. So, we did some private label work for some companies within our industry that were also manufacturers. So they were a great example. Big company, really stringent protocols on their 5S side of things. So we started with that, and then also our supply chain. So, non-direct competitors, people we were buying from that had really well set up shops. Maybe it was a very specific focus, maybe even niche manufacturing segment.
Yep,
But vendors that I had been to that I knew had really well run, well organized, efficient operations. We started there.
gotcha. And then after you do these tours, so you had a very specific reason for going to a specific place. Like you already knew what part of their operation you wanted your team to see. What was kind of like the after action? Like, um, how did you reinforce the learning and maybe create some concrete steps to implement some of those things inside of your business?
Yeah, we're never done. We're not there. We're always going to keep working on it. For us, it was now internalize it. So what did that mean for us? Okay, we worked with one of the individual departments, a manager, a lead within that department that was really picking up on it really strongly, adopting it, not a resistor by any means. We started with his department and said,
Hmm.
hey, we're going to go after some 5S initiatives. It's going to be coupled with some plant layout organization improvements. So again, going back to efficiencies, reduction of handling, just very simple things. But
Yep.
let's lead. Let's create an example within our building to again garner that widespread support. So we started small. We've got about 6 departments in our building. We started with one department, relayed things out, and then the second thing I didn't get to before that, we're working hard on is we're a manufacturer, right? We don't get to grow without headcount, and we've struggled to stay at full headcount. Certainly post pandemic, our market saw a boom. The ESSER funds in education was a big windfall for a lot of our customers. So we experienced some great business growth after that. And recruiting is one area that we tended to think about a ancillary benefit to improving our operations. So,
Hmm.
it's not just sweep up, tidy up, reorganize. No, we invested in, polishing the floors within our operation, improving LED lighting. So really making it an environment that people wanted to be in,
Yep.
um, slowly throughout our
Yeah.
operation. So
Yeah.
we viewed that as a secondary benefit.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's fulfill the promise at the beginning of the podcast here and just tell me what kind of what are the impacts that the tariffs have had on your business, and maybe also kind of how it started and how it's morphed to give us a little bit of a clearer picture of what's going on right now.
Yeah. I'll answer this in 2 parts. So we've got within our businesses, we've got 2 businesses. We've got one that is a larger importer of some finished goods, and then we have the business Palmer Hamilton, which is a purebred domestic manufacturer made in the USA all day. So I'm very torn with the answer to these questions because I'm a big proponent in domestic manufacturing. I really believe in the workforce in the U.S. here, but I also fully recognize there's some business segments and goods that we are just not positioned to deliver cost effective product in.
Right.
Um, so to directly answer this, on the domestic manufacturing side, immediate shock, right? Like, everybody reacts very differently. Some people react very quickly. Thankfully, our direct imports for Palmer Hamilton were very minimal. Our indirect imports, you think nuts, bolts, screws, hardware type elements, those represent 2 to 3% of our cost of goods. So
Mhm.
not a major impact to our business. Some of our ancillary buyout finished goods items, we had to react quickly, right? We went immediately from being a profitable buyout item to an unprofitable buyout item.
Right.
And in a market that's very slow to react, we had to implement surcharges immediately. And so did a lot of our other competitors. Within Palmer Hamilton, we also compete. Some of the people in our industry are pure play importers, so do not domestically produce this product, which we feel we are very well suited to produce. So it benefited our company from that standpoint.
Right.
That some of our regular competitors that competed against us on price point, now we're at a price point advantage immediately overnight
Right.
in such a dynamic situation. You talk about trying to stay up on the topic, it changes daily. So
Yeah.
a very different feeling. And then on the finished goods side of the business, immediate price increases, right? Because those tariffs are due from us, the manufacturer, to customs at point of import. So, we had to immediately react, immediately pass on price, because we don't know what's going to happen. They could last a year, they could last 5 years. Trump term one put in tariffs in place that stayed in place all through the Biden administration as well. So
Hmm.
there's no promise that tomorrow they're going away with a new administration either. So you've got to put yourself in a position to compete. long term profitably.
Right. So when you had to pass that cost on to the customer, um, did you see a dramatic impact on sales, or did people more or less accept it?
So for Palmer Hamilton, it was very minimal, right? Those are 3% of our COGS. So our price increases were very product line focused.
Right.
That were we're a project based business, so we're not selling one widget. We're selling 15 widgets in a whole design space. So it kind of washes out with the rest. So the total project level impact due to tariffs can be 3, 4, 5%. Now the product line impact could be 25%, 15%, right?
Hmm.
Controversially, in the other business that we operate, where it's all finished goods, we have had a hard time competing. There's a lot of competitors that are directly listing their product and they're not domestic entities.
Hmm.
And we've had a hard time keeping up with them since they're not playing by the same rules us as domestic entities are playing by. So we certainly, I cannot say we have maintained our market share. I definitely think we've lost some market share due to our inability to hold price.
When you say directly listing, what's the kind of loophole that they're using there?
Yeah, so there's a lot of a loophole that's closing, right? A lot of these entities are overseas entities that are selling on large marketplaces. Think of eBay's and Amazon's, where they're maybe importing it at different rates. Maybe it's the manufacturer and they're importing at their cost and not reseller costs. So that's a whole margin profile that's not getting tariffed,
Hmm.
since it's due to those cost of goods. And then the tax reporting back to those entities in the foreign countries that they're in. Also a loophole that thankfully in the last week or so there's news happening that those earnings are getting reported back to the foreign governments as well. So on a product line that's very price sensitive, we've always been at a little price point premium, but we thought been providing a service with a domestic entity from a service level standpoint, design, bunch of other things. But now, you're talking a price point gap of 30, 40, 50% in some cases that the
Yeah.
consumer's just not willing to bear.
Right. Yeah, that's dramatic. Um, if you could if you could say one thing to the Trump administration about the tariffs, what would you say?
Foreign governments don't pay the tariff.
Yeah.
and and the other thing I would say from a standpoint of what the intention of them were, right? Because we're I'm the CEO of a business that directly benefited from these tariffs. They did exactly what they were intended to do, right? Drive more manufacturing in the U.S. But that's in a category that the U.S. is well positioned to support. Our
Right.
other business, I do not know of a single manufacturer in the U.S. that can come even close to the price points that our customers require. So my word to them would be, tariffs work in the right, HTS codes, in the right business segments, in the right product lines, they work. But some product categories, we don't have the skilled workforce that it takes or the cost of labor to do what it takes. And the automation doesn't exist.
Right. Right. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see kind of what pans out. I mean, my hope has been that the tariffs would have, the effect, whether it be getting them to reduce their tariff on the goods that we ship over there, or to achieve some other, political, territorial, whatever it might be, goals. But then it kind of normalizes and people can kind of adjust to what's going on. And I think if you were to kind of look at it from that perspective, a year is not a long time. I mean, to do these negotiations, you know, and when you look at somebody like China, they don't have a presidential election every 4 years, so they might not cave at all, because they're just like, well, we'll just endure it for 4 years, and then it'll be back to business as usual. But unfortunately, that 4 years in the U.S. is going to mean that, well, the Republican Party doesn't get reelected ever, and a number of other negative repercussions. So yeah, it's really hard to know kind of what the right path is. I mean, I think there are a lot of trade imbalances that needed to be fixed and do need to be fixed. Um, and I don't know if there's other mechanisms to do that. So yeah, it'll be
It
interesting to see what plays
it
out.
it has been, what has been interesting to see, we were importing directly from China on relationships that I actually set up at the previous company I was working at. And, we immediately had to pivot. We looked outside of China, we looked to Vietnam. A lot of them had already set up manufacturing operations in Vietnam, these Chinese based companies, other additional companies. They they didn't like losing the business to Vietnam. They tried very, very hard to bring it back to China. I think, there was a lot of capacity that went unfilled in China, and a lot of these manufacturing partners, which, these are relationships that I have developed, right?
Yeah,
These are partnerships that were working well. We did right by each other, and they didn't do anything wrong, but the business had to move to Vietnam because we weren't willing to increase our prices by another 30-40%.
right.
So, I think to your point, that stability coming back, I think these trade agreements are beginning to bring that stability back. However, pricing in the marketplace in certain categories is certainly elevating.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how much of this vertical integration has occurred in your time there since what 2019?
Yeah, a lot. It's been really cool to be a part of. I came on board in 2019. Obviously, we had this little thing called a pandemic that happened shortly thereafter, impacted our business. We were available for a lot of the government funding, such as the Payment Protection Program. A lot of that funding allowed us to invest in our companies domestically here and improve our vertical integration. So we went from buying out, multiples of $1 million from manufacturing partners in the Wisconsin area to vertically integrating here in house. So we've really taken it step by step, looking at the ROI, what is the best ROI, what is, from a skill set standpoint, something we can bring in house with the workforce that we have and be the makers of our own destiny. Since, the supply chain disruptions were vast coming out of
Mm,
that, right?
yeah.
And so our business is very project based. We seek to come into a school, set up an entire space. So there's a lot of, it's a mini construction project, right? You've got a
Mhm.
lot of things coming together all at once. And we didn't want to be late, right? Because kids are only out of school for so long, and we've got to do those overhauls and those cafeteria projects. So it was really important to us to, one, improve our cost structures, but also secondarily improve our on time delivery performance.
Right. So what did you during that time? What did you have in house as far as your capabilities go? And then what was like the first thing that you added? What did you feel like
Yeah,
you?
of course. So our product line, what's unique about us is our end product is both wood and laminate, metal, plastics. It's a very comprehensive product. So we need a lot of different processes under our roof in order to do the whole thing.
Right.
So have always been pretty well vertically integrated in the flat panel processing, so laminate processing side. We were very weak on the metal fabrication side. So we did a lot of tube processing, but we didn't do a lot of like sheet metal processing. So we did a little bit of stamping here and there, no laser cutting, no sheet metal bending. So that's where we started, right? Was on the metals side of our business.
Yep.
So, first thing, everybody, in any manufacturing center in the US, there's a flat panel laser within 5 miles of where you're at, right?
Right.
So we brought a lot of that back in house right away. So bringing those in, be able to be more just in time operation, reduce our inventory levels, make our cash stretch farther. And with flat panel processing, you immediately have to bend it and form it as well. So the sheet metal forming were one and two for us.
Right. Yeah, and some of that's pretty expensive equipment. How long did it take before you saw a return on investment?
Um, it's always the question. You never go back and pinpoint that exact date where you. I'm sure some people do, but we're not quite like that. All the return on spends that we did on the sheet metal side was all less than 2 years.
Right.
We had some pretty good volume with buyout laser houses in the area here. So we had some good volume to leverage right away, which we are in complete control of. So we were able to kind of develop a good, healthy book of business for these new processes in house in order to make that ROI happen much faster.
Right, right. Yeah, and then the intangibles too, the on-time delivery, possibly some, quality increases. I would imagine that stuff was noticeable as well, right?
Yeah, after those investments, we did one more investment, which was a tube laser, which is as far as capabilities goes, it's a little more unique. So it's a very cool process. We do a lot of tube processing, was very helpful to us. For every flat panel laser out there, there's maybe, within 5 miles, there's not a tube laser within 40 miles.
Hmm.
So it's definitely a process that's a little more special. And then we got into the robotic welding side of things. So again, like I noted, efficiencies is where we're really focusing. And the robotic welding is a big quality improvement. There's some really large repeatability there that greatly came into play. And then on the tube laser side, the quality definitely improved because we were changing from processes that were perhaps multi-stepped to singular stepped.
Right.
So efficiency and quality, those areas, quality went up really fast. The flat panel is more of a stepping stone to
Yeah,
get to those next areas.
I see. So, what was it? Just the monetary investment? What was? I guess the business has been around for a long time. Your dad ran it for a long time. Why hadn't some of these processes been brought in house prior? What was kind of like the obstacle?
Yeah, I think I helped the business to think a little bigger.
Hmm.
Think I'd seen these processes in house, under roof, in other areas. I think I was able to help bring the technical analysis side to the table to really understand how this would get deployed within the business. And then there's always capital limitations, right? The
Right.
timing was great, right? Some of the PPP money really put the business in a position where we could invest
Hmm.
really aggressively, and we invested for the long haul. And so those two combinations, the timing happened really well, and then some pretty levels of some good years of high demand following that as well. So
Right.
um, timing didn't hurt either.
Yeah, for sure. So with you kind of referred to it as a small business, and, obviously in comparison to the publicly traded one that you worked for before, but in relation to manufacturing, I think it's a relatively large business.
Mhm.
Um, and with large businesses comes hiring difficulties, and I know even small guys with 10 to 30 guys struggle to find the right employees. How are you so successful in maintaining the workforce that you do have, and how do you source new talent?
Yeah. We haven't cracked the code yet. I think we've come within a few percentage points of being fully staffed. We've come really close. We haven't cracked the code yet. We approached it from two avenues, right? Workforce retention and workforce acquisition, right? We started talking about, hey, what are these seats that are unfilled cost us as a business, and realized really quickly that revenue we were avoiding by not having people in these roles really allowed us to put a priority in an acquisition side in a bigger way. Um, we had some other local businesses that we mentored with, talked about what's working for them, and we really got creative, right? So we really tried to highlight rewarding our employees from a referral standpoint. We started a golden ticket program. Think about Willy Wonka, where it's if you refer somebody and they stay with us for a year, you get 1 week of free vacation and spending cash.
Whoa,
So,
that's
and we've
great.
given out, I think we've given out 15 or 20 golden tickets already since we've
That's
implemented that. And it's only
awesome.
been 3 years.
That's awesome.
So getting creative on the retention, on the talent acquisition side, we also did, hey, you refer somebody, it doesn't matter if they're going to be a good fit or the right fit. That's up to us to make that decision. We just need you to refer people. And
Hmm.
we were giving people, gift cards for dinner on the town with their wives or significant others. So it was really about focusing about giving people something special instead of something simple and monetary or nothing at all. because
Right.
we realized what it was costing us from a business standpoint. And, at the end of the day, the vacation's an easy thing to give. And it was so well received within our employee pool.
Yeah.
And then on the retention side, right? So we really tried to dive in hard on like where we're losing people, where are people heading out the door, why are they heading out the door, can we do something there? And we started a program similar to what the Army did with the buddy program, right? Like, hey, we're going to team you up with somebody right away that you may not become their friend. That's up to you eventually and how that interpersonal happens, but they're going to be somebody that's there for you if you have any question. If it's something you don't want to ask your supervisor, you're just, wanting to figure out the business, do a tour, see other operations, see other pieces of our operation, you can go to this individual. They've been here a long time. They know the ropes. You're going to feel like you're part of the family here right away. So those two things really helped us, I think, elevate our headcount to be a level that's close to fully staffed. We were never quite there. We're in a unique region that I think limits some of that, but that's
So,
how we.
so it sounds like you noticed that you were losing people early, like they,
Mhm.
maybe within the first year or something like that.
Or a few weeks,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And so, so then how did you dig into that problem further and find out that potentially that buddy system would be the solution?
Yeah, so we actually found out, if they lasted a year, they're likely going to stick. If they lasted 6 months, they're likely going to stick. So we started tracking some KPIs within our business, which was 90-day turnover for new hires, right? So if you turned over within the first 90 days, we wanted to track that percentage, how often it's happening, and really investigate the why, right?
Hmm.
Um, so we found that people that felt like they were a part of the company, part of delivering that value to the end user, they were likely to stay.
Hmm.
So we looked at a lot of HR related data, and we tried to determine what programs can we put in place to make people feel like they're a part of something greater here, you motivating them in a different way.
I see. I see. And I would, were you able to track metrics like, what the, 90-day turnover was prior to implementing that?
Yeah, we saw, I think at our peak, a 25% improvement of 90-day turnover. So we had some poor numbers. 40% of our hires were turning over within the first 90 days,
Ooh,
which just puts a lot of undue stress on the business.
yeah,
We hired a recruiter full time in house, and it's a lot of effort to only have a hit rate of 60%. So
yeah.
we really wanted to look, self reflect. What are we doing? How are we setting people up for success? We work hard to change the jobs to make them easier, but at the end of the day, we're in manufacturing. There's some things that aren't the easiest to do.
Right.
There's some hard work that needs to get done, and we're always going to try to make that easier and better. But through that process, we wanted to just see what we could do to drive that retention up. So yeah, our programs definitely delivered value in the 25, I think, percent range. So we got down to 15% turnover within 90 days.
Wow, that's very impressive. And that turnover issue is common to a lot of manufacturers, and I would imagine that 90-day time frame is probably pretty industry standard. Um, so I want to know. I don't see that the buddy system could be the only element of success there. What are some of the other techniques that you did to kind of create more of that team mentality to give them more feeling of the value that they're bringing to the customer and things like that?
Yeah. There is no silver bullet without a doubt, right? There is always something more. So again, just how can we be sticky, right? So the referral programs actually worked really well for new hires as well.
Yep.
For the ones that stuck around, they liked it here. And then getting them to be a part of that they're feeling of something greater, right? This next generation of worker really wants to be motivated in a different way than previous generations. They want to feel like they're a part of something, like they're delivering value greater than themselves.
Right.
And what we really try to do then is highlight people within these four walls that emulate our core values as a business, right?
Hmm.
So we've got some core values, that we set out to really embody here, and we highlight those individuals quarterly, right? And say, hey, these are some examples of people that are emulating these core values really, really well, and really highlighting people like that continually so that they felt
Right.
like they were in a place of that was constantly positively recognizing the workforce.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, employee recognition is a huge thing. Is it just sort of an email that goes out, or is there actually some sort of a reward for that, quarterly winner, or how does that work?
Yeah. So we try to communicate very clearly to our entire organization once a quarter. So we've got a company-wide all hands meeting that we have. We've got some remote people that join as well, and we highlight those people in that meeting in front of all of their peers, in front of the whole company. Their supervisor is the one that kind of talks about this individual and how they emulate those core values as well. And we've really seen that get received really, really well within our organization.
Okay. Um, what have you seen? So I've noticed personally a little bit of a shift in the workforce environment, just overall employment in the U.S. over the past couple of years. And the way that I describe it is, it seemed like in the post-COVID era, it was the employee had all the power, and they could find a job anywhere they wanted at whatever price that they wanted. And I think the pendulum has been kind of swinging back the other way, and I'm hearing a lot of people that are looking for jobs are having a difficult time doing it. I know even locally here, this brand, Wabtec, which is a subsidiary, I guess, of GE, has laid off 800 people. And I know somebody that was affected by that. What have you kind of noticed in this space? Have you seen sort of a similar trend?
Very, very similar. Immediately post COVID, our businesses thrived with all the additional funding going into the institutions that are our customers. We struggled to get people in the door. That also doesn't help the turnover numbers because you tend to be hiring individuals that maybe you shouldn't be,
Right.
and aren't a good fit culturally or personally for the business. So we really were trying hard to get as many people as we can. Now, obviously in this era that you talked about, yes, it has definitely shifted back. We are able to be a little more picky with higher quality candidates, which helps our turnover percentage as well. And in the white collar side of our business, the more office focused jobs, the work as well has evolved in our facilitation. We're a manufacturer, right? You can't run a CNC machine from work from home, right? So
Mhm.
we really flexed a bit and allowed a lot of work from home instances. And like anything, there's a few bad apples that take advantage.
Right.
And again, we're trying to promote that teamwork and that culture, and delivering on something for our customers that's really inspiring. And it's hard to do remotely, right? There
Right.
is jobs that are done very easily remotely, and it's very individualistic at times. Our business was not one of them. So we really shifted to, hey, you're going to be in house, you're going to be working with a team, you're going to be collaborating with our shop floor and the people out there that are turning the bolts, running the CNCs. So that has also benefited in our ability to be able to do that, since that kind of power dynamic has shifted back to the employer.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and I think it's a good thing. I mean, it's good to see that happen. It was really, I mean, it was putting employers through a lot of pain, not only because they couldn't fill positions, but then, like you said, a lot of cases these individuals wanted to just stay on unemployment, but they had to show that they were looking for a job. So then they come in and waste your time to interview them, and maybe they come in for a week and then they're out or something like that. So yeah, it wasn't a good situation. That was created.
Or start work for 2 days and get a better offer and leave,
Right.
right? And
Exactly.
now all that effort and energy to being an employee is now for naught because they've gone great. And again, I'm all for people doing better for themselves, but it's difficult to have individuals like that just hop that quickly.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, I think we talked about a lot of awesome stuff today and things that have value. I mean, I think it's always interesting from a manufacturer's perspective to kind of hear, the issues other people are going through. Just and figure out how they're dealing with them. And obviously, workforce is a big one. Tariffs have been a big one. Um, you know, we certainly could talk at length about 5S. We have done some other podcasts on the subject. So if you wanted to learn more about that, certainly you can go back to I think Chris Temple was one of the best ones that we had on regarding 5S. But no, I really appreciate all the insights that you provided today. I think you're doing an awesome job there, and really look forward to seeing the growth that you guys have over the next few years here.
Much appreciated, Nate. Thank you, and thank you for the value you provide. I think that camaraderie within the space goes a long ways. A lot of the groups that we're a part of here locally and within the state really help us get better through podcasts like this and sharing of what each of us are doing. And it might not be a direct correlation, but just taking little tidbits of how it can apply to your own business can really be helpful.
Yep.
So I love these types of programs and really love what you're doing here.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I mean, like that golden ticket idea. I mean, that's something anybody can do. That's a great
Yeah,
idea. It's really cool.
it is. It's
Yep,
easy to do as well.
yep, very cool. Awesome. Well, thanks again.
Thanks, Nate.